This is what to do in a nuclear crisis, part 2. This is part 2 of the long version. There's also a 4-minute short version. What we're doing now is we're going over in a little bit more detail things that I covered in part 1, which is about 26 minutes long. This one I'm going to start off with with homeopathy, because this is designed for intended for people who are in the midst of a crisis situation, so you may be sheltering in place right now. I want to reiterate that the author is not a physician, psychiatrist, or expert in defense or radiation, and this is just a compilation of private research. And so what we're going to do first is go over homeopathy. Before you embark on any medical treatment, please consult with your physician. So here are some of the homeopathic remedies, things you may have in your house. Bee pollen, ginkgo, golden seal, gotu kola, vitamin C, bifidus, chlorella, and acetylcysteine, known as NAC, superoxide dismutase, curcumin, and there are some more listed on this website over here. Radiation remedies, aged garlic extract, aloe, Bengal quince, cat's claw, field mint, dangui, eleuthero, fish poison, goat weed, goji berries, gotu kola, ginkgo biloba, goduchi, haritaki, holy basil, Himalayan mayapple, java plum, licorice, miracle tree, milk thistle, moringa oleifera, onion, panax ginseng, peppermint, red amaranth, rosemary, sea buckthorn, St. John's wort, Tinospora cordifolia, turmeric, which is curry again, wild celery, and wild rosemary. So what I want to do from here is go over a few of the details of how these might work. So for curcumin, which is also curry or turmeric, some of the research on that can be found in this journal article, Radio Protection and Radiosensitization by Curcumin from Advances in Experimental Medicine and in Biology. And so I looked up a couple of things here. It looks like sometimes people take it orally, and sometimes, like within food and so forth, sometimes people do apply it topically, so you want to look up your own research on that. Some scientists in India have found that it has skin recuperative properties for people who, photoprotective properties. If it's applied topically, it will stain your skin. And then people who use that for chemotherapy, it reduces the amount of the severity of the radiation burns. It also improves, according to some research, it improves the effects of the chemotherapy. So there's still ongoing research on that, and it's not 100% either way. However, I know one of the biggest concerns was that it might possibly inhibit the chemotherapy or the radiation. So that's how people use that product. And so the vitamin C, which a lot of people would probably have that on hand, it protects from radiation poisoning, and you can read articles about that. And something else that people might have, you might have bee pollen in your home. And so from WebMD, so one small study found evidence that bee pollen might reduce some side effects of radiation therapy for cancer. And I don't know that you would have the other things on hand, so I just kind of wanted to go through the basics of that. What I'm going to go over next, I'm going to go over in the same order that we did in part 1, just in more detail. So survival guides will be first, then first aid, then shelter, supplies, water, and food. Coping skills, we pretty much covered that, so I don't think I need to go over that again. Maybe a little tiny bit more about communication, and a little bit more about sanitation. This will be no more than about 30 minutes long, because it does cut me off and does not save the recording. So what we'll go over first is survival guides or survival manuals. Nuclear War Survival Skills is a published book by Crescent Carney, who has a BS in Civil Engineering from Princeton and MS in Geology from Oxford University. Published by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, a facility of the U.S. Department of Energy. This book is 300 pages long. I believe that he released the copyright so that it would be more available to people who would need it in an emergency, which was very nice of him. It is available for purchase for about $20. Again, you want to start off with Chapter 5, Shelter, 8, Water, 9, Food, 13, First Aid. There's a website version of that, and there's a PDF version. The website version is very quick, but then you can't really download it. And here's the index right here. The PDF version may take a few minutes to download, so just make sure that you have a high-speed enough internet connection to download that. Or you can just download these individual chapters that I have linked into ibiblio.org/rcip/nuclear.html. It's also available, the whole thing, the 300-page version is available at ki4u.com and homelandcivildefense.org. It's also available off of Google Books and also from Amazon. But the later two don't have a functioning index where you can click on the page number and go straight to the page number. It's a little bit tricky to scroll through because it will not scroll particularly easily. Other manuals would be Nuclear Detonation Preparedness, Communicating in the Immediate Aftermath, FEMA Nuclear War Survival, 1985, Planning Guidance for Response to Nuclear Detonation, and also the short KI4U Guide on Nuclear Accident Preparation. And so also within, I have some links to research. If you're interested in research, there are a number of bibliographies. You can just Google bibliography and radiation or radiation emergency. There are some from the EPA. There are some from REMM, the government website. And if you look for research pathfinders and radiation, you'll find several from FEMA and I think Homeland Security has one. But so Emergency Medical Services Pathfinder, a guide to the literature. It's going to tell you the best books, magazine articles, peer-reviewed articles. Usually it will tell you library databases if it's a library pathfinder, which is just a word for a research website, and multimedia resources. And also there are some books that you can look at, government websites, and so forth. So from here, we're going to go to first aid. So we've already gone over shelter and shower, clean your wound first and then cover it and then shower to prevent cross-contamination. If you cannot shower or remove clothing, cover your mouth and nose with a damp cloth and brush debris off until you can remove your clothing and shower. And that showering and removing clothes will remove 90 to 99% of contamination. Of course, you don't want to brush your dust off onto someone else or into an area that's already been decontaminated. You do want to wear a dust mask. The main medications, potassium iodide, DTPA, Prussian blue, and Neupogen. I think I went over this already, but essentially putting a hand-sized patch of topical iodine over the abdomen in some studies resulted in 82% reduction of the uptake of radioactive iodine. Essentially, you are filling your thyroid gland with non-radioactive iodine so that it can't absorb any radioactive iodine. And so for burns, we definitely went over this, but use a clean, sterile, non-adherent dressing. Do not use salves. Butter, oil, cucumber juice, or other salves will increase the infection risk according to research. And you should consult with your physician, of course, before you do any treatments. For wounds, some of the research addresses more detailed issues, such as if there's a piece of radioactive metal inside the wound, whether you should or should not remove it. That's kind of something that you're going to have to use your judgment on, or if you can reach a physician, that's something you would want to go over with them. The first aid manual that I found that was the best one in my experience is about, I think it's about 200 pages long, is created in the US, and I'll tell you the title of that in just a second. And I'll reiterate that a good website to get medical information from is called Radiation Emergency Medical Management website. So if you Google First Aid Headquarters Departments of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, December 2002, then you can pull up this 224-page first aid manual. It is approved for multiple countries. It's created in Washington, D.C. So the next thing that we want to go on to is shelter. I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. Of course, you want to be in the middle room or the basement with few windows. When I mentioned that you shouldn't, that after the immediate blast, you want to avoid places where the fallout will settle. That doesn't mean during the beginning hours, right after a blast. You do want to go possibly to the basement in the first hours after the blast, but then after a while has passed, if there is radioactive dust in the air, then that's when you would want to avoid places like the roof and some areas of the basement that could have an accumulation. And you can get more information on that from the CDC website, bt.cdc.gov/radiation, and you can check all of your facts that way. If you are evacuating, you don't want to travel with the fallout path, essentially. You don't want the radioactive fallout to be following you as you're driving, so that you're traveling with it. So travel at right angles away from the plume center line. It's called lateral evacuation. And you can look that up at planning guidance for response to a nuclear detonation by the government, essentially, in FEMA. If you are near the blast when it occurs, turn away, cover your eyes, drop to the ground face down, and place your hands under your body. Remain flat until 2 shock waves passed. If you are outside, find something to cover your mouth. Remove any dust from your clothes while covering your mouth and nose, then shower and shelter. You can check that information at the CDC Evacuation Radiation Information page. And you can also check to see if you're near a nuclear power plant evacuation zone. The website should be working now. And you can just click on your location and it will tell you if you're in a zone within a certain number of miles of a nuclear power plant. So next we're going to supplies, water, and food. We went over safe water sources last time. I think I read them out twice. But essentially, I want to reiterate, to fact check, you can find information on that from FEMA and ready.gov. So what I didn't go over was that the official laboratory technique would be reverse osmosis treatment with Gore-Tex fabric to keep radioactive plutonium and strontium out of the drinking water. You probably need lab equipment to accomplish this, so I kind of wanted to go over the filtering process that you could do as a non-guaranteed alternative at home, filtering through dense clay or earth, and that's essentially kind of looks like a terrarium. So from the top layer downwards in a container, like one of those clear file folder hanging files, that kind of thing would probably work. So there's water on the top, then porous fabric, clay soil 6 to 7 inches, another strip of fabric, layer of fabric, 1.5 inches of pebbles, and then you need sticks to prop it up, and then a pan to catch the filtered water underneath. And that's called filtering. If you want to check on that, you could look up information about soil aquifer treatment systems. That is an official scientific method of removing things like fecal coliforms, suspended solids, and so forth from water in places that do not have clean water. I did not find anything about radiation being removed via this method, because if you had the equipment, you would be using the other method with the reverse osmosis, more than likely. However, it has been recommended mostly by the NWSS. That's the recommended if you don't have any other means. You could try this. The other method is settling. Basically, clay particles will carry most of the suspended radioactive particles to the bottom. So you fill a bucket with 3/4 full with water. You dig up clay from 4 or more inches underground and mix it with the water. About 1 inch clay for every 4 inches of water, and then you let it settle for 6 hours and siphon or dip the water out. Other ways, if you had equipment to remove radiation, would be an ion exchanger, water softener, cation exchanger, and lime softening. Outdoor water sources would be water from deep wells, water tanks, covered reservoirs into which no fallout has been introduced, water from covered seepage pits, or shallow hand-dug wells. If the earth is not sandy, gravelly, or too porous, filtration through earth is effective. And here's the page from the NWSS that reviews that. Has methods for carrying water, methods for storing water. It's pretty thorough, really. And you can see, if you're watching the film version of this, there's an audio and a film version. I'm just kind of scrolling through. And so here is the filter, you can see. And so that's just some information that you can look out for. And also fast-flowing rivers, water in pipes and containers, underground wells, and springs. And that relates to Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 of NWSS. No matter what you're filtering, what you're using to filter, you also need to purify the water. So there's kind of 3 essential means for that. Boiling 3 to 5 minutes with collecting anything that's evaporated. And then there's also adding 4 drops of household bleach with 5.25% sodium hypochlorite, no scented or color-safe bleach, and let it stand for 30 minutes. And then there's distillation, where essentially you're boiling it, it's all evaporating, and you're catching all the vapor, condensing it back into water. None of this is guaranteed to remove radiation. However, the distillation is probably your better bet out of the 3. You can check that at Radiologic Emergency, Protecting School Children and the Public. Some of that is there. And then also, and that is an article published in the American Journal of Nursing. In terms of food, we've gone over that. Make sure you just cover all your food. If the cans have radioactive dust on them, they will become radioactive, so cover everything. You want to store your food in a cool, dry place off of the ground. In terms of out-of-door foods, underground tubers or underground vegetables would be safest, followed by smooth-skinned fruits. If you're eating an animal, avoid the thyroid gland, liver, and kidneys. And I'm aware I'm being slightly repetitive, but I did do the other film several days ago, so I can't remember exactly what I've already said. There's a list of emergency supplies that you can gather ahead of time from the CDC at their website. You can just Google that, preparing emergency supplies. It's kind of not something that you would do in the midst, and so that's kind of the perspective that we're coming from right now. So the next thing we want to go over, I already went over coping skills pretty thoroughly. I'm not going to review that except to encourage you to research PTSD and how that is affecting you and come up with the best coping skills for yourself that you can. Next, we're going to go to communication. And most people, a lot of people know this, but Skype.com is the most popular free phone method. You have to pay a little bit if you want to call somebody's cell phone with a phone number, or you can contact each other, but you have to have the other person's username in order to contact them. And so most people use Skype, and you can do international calls with that. The other one that I found, I'm sure there's many, but one of them is Whistlephone. You can get a free trial for 1 month, and that you can call people's cell phones or regular phone numbers with that for 1 month without paying anything. Also, you want to find your local highway advisory radio. There are some websites that have an index, and so they will tell you, what radio station you need to go to. It's an AM station usually. But I found that a lot of them don't have a national index, and so you would have to Google it, Highway Advisory Radio, HAR, locations, and then the name of your city and state. And then you can find the best radio stations for emergency information that way. I also have linked into some formal information about how the National Emergency Communications Plan is structured from Department of Homeland Security and so forth, but we're not going to go over that necessarily. I will go over the hotlines again. 1-800-CDC-INFO, 1-800-BE-READY. If you're near a power plant, 1-800-DIAL, DIAL, DOE. And also FEMA, 1-800-621-FEMA. And you can contact them if you have any specific questions. Some of them may be pre-recorded message. Next, we're going to go on to sanitation. It's kind of common sense. Keep things clean or else intestinal ailments will result, which would not be what you want in this type of situation. Obviously, if possible, shower and shelter. You want to, so we already went over, removing the outer layer at the very least. Supplies, one of the first things you might want to do when you're setting up housekeeping is get a plastic bucket with a lid and line it with a garbage bag so that you can make a makeshift toilet, basically. And then you put 2 pieces of wood on either side of it. You kind of create a seat of some sort, because you're probably not going to be flushing the toilet if there's a problem with the water supply and so forth. You do want to keep that covered. It is going to smell pretty quickly. You want to dispose of the waste away from water supplies and away from living spaces. You can also wrap it in newspapers and store it in a large can with a tight-fitting lid. You can also put a garbage bag inside the toilet bowl if there's no water in the toilet anymore. And that way you can kind of empty the waste out of the toilet, because you do not want to be in an enclosed space with that type of waste. You can also pour bleach into it to keep it disinfected, to keep it from infecting people. You want to keep hands and utensils clean, use paper plates or eat from original containers, wash and peel all fruits and vegetables, keep all your food covered, and prepare only what can be eaten at each meal. I know we covered earlier that you don't want to reheat meat once it's been cooked, because that will increase your chances of food poisoning. And also keep the area clean that you're living in, so to prevent insects and so forth. So essentially that was the last area that we really wanted to cover. And if you want to find out some of the articles that I got my information from, again, that's ibiblio.org/rcip/nuclear.html. It is a nonprofit host, and nobody hosted by ibiblio makes money off of their websites. So I'm sure that there are some other things we could go through, but I don't want it to cut me off again, so I will just go over the basic information again. The public response should be shelter and shower. Sheltering, particularly at home, is prudent early in a radiologic event. Because families congregate at home in showers, clean clothing, food, and water are available. Sheltering also provides authorities time to assess the situation more completely. Evacuation might be indicated later for people in some locations, depending on the specific situation and the extended dose estimates. In other locations, remaining sheltered may result in lower radiation exposure. And that's from Flynn and Goins, 2006. And I think that is about it. Okay, so this has been a reading out of the website for what to do in a nuclear crisis. And this recording does not supersede any current announcements by government or media. For current instructions and announcements, please call 1-800-BE-READY, 1-800-CDC-INFO, or 1-800-DIAL-DOE. Thank you very much.